I can't just talk about Kwanzaa. I got to talk about other things because of the holidays. So I'm going to start there. So I'm going to give like an overview of the holidays. So this is just the Imhotep version of the overview of the holidays. So and you know what? If you have any questions, just jump in. We're all friends here, and we're all trying to learn. So it might be something that you may want to make a comment on, or just add questions to it. So there's this brother, and Taimba and Nokichi. They actually attended this church in Washington, D.C. It was, the pastor was Reverend Isamusa BARASHANGO, and the name of the church was the Church of the Black Messiah. Church of the Black Messiah in Washington, D.C. And what Dr. Reverend Isamusa BARASHANGO, for me, is most noted for is these two books. He wrote Volume 1 and Volume 2, African People and European Holidays, A Mental Genocide. So in this book, one, he talks about the Misgiving Day, and he gives us this whole history on the Thanksgiving Day, the origin and the interaction between the native peoples and the Europeans, and you know, gives a timeline of how things progressed there. And then he talks about something that we're going to talk about today called the Merry Mess. And this is referring to Christmas. And in book 2, he covers, among other things, the 4th of July. The 4th of July. So he has these names: Misgiving Day, the Merry Mess, and the 4th of July. And here is Reverend BARASHANGO. He is now joined the ancestors, and he's no longer with us, but his publications are still out there, and you can still get his books if you. He has a series of other books. You can get his books if you search for them.
What about his church?
You know, I'm not sure about that. You know, you'd have to ask Brother Ty. And I want to say that it's no longer in existence, but I don't know that for sure. That's a good question. Yeah, European Holidays and Mental Genocide is the name of the book. And in his book, so he has different quotes from various people. And this particular one is what Frederick Douglass talks about his experiences during the Christmas seasons. He says, the holidays between Christmas and New Year's were allowed the slaves as holidays. During these days, all regular work was suspended, and there was nothing to do but keep fires and look after stock. We regarded this time as our own by the grace of our masters, and we therefore used it or abused it as we pleased. The holidays were variously spent. The sober, industrious one employed themselves in manufacturing corn brooms, mats, horse collars, baskets, and some of these were very well made. Another class spent their time in hunting possums, coons, rabbits, and other game. But the majority spent the holidays in sports: ball playing, wrestling, boxing, running, foot races, dancing, drinking whiskey, and the latter mode was generally most agreeable to their masters. A slave who would work during the holidays was thought by his master undeserving of holidays. There was, in this simple act of continued work and acquisition against slaves, a slave could not help thinking that if he made $3 during the holidays, he might make $300 during the year. not to be drunk during the holidays was disgraceful. So these are just some of the rememberings of Frederick Douglass. And then he goes on to say, we were induced to drink. And, you know, that's what we're induced to for the holidays during this season. European holidays of mental genocide. And this is another section in his book. He says, for many years, there was a controversy over the exact date upon which Christmas should be celebrated. The Eastern Church at Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, has celebrated the birth of Jesus, the visit of the wise men, the baptism of Jesus on January 6th, which was referred to in the Western Church as the Feast of the Epiphany. This date is observed by the Eastern Orthodox Church even to this day. Some of the other dates that were celebrated throughout the 300 or so years before the finalization of December 5th were January 8th, February 2nd, March 25th, or March 29th, April 19th, May 20th, September 29th. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't know what what day to choose. Yeah. And then European bishops got together and said, look at all this confusion about the birthday of Jesus is going to be stopped. And this is the day we choose, and we have the armies of Constantine to enforce it. So the Roman Catholic Church finally decided December 25th would be the best date, since some Europeans already celebrating Saturnia on that date. And by the end of the 4th century of the Common Era, the Christian world, with the exception of the Eastern churches and possibly the Coptic Church of Ethiopia, was celebrating Christmas on December 25th. So, you know, he just kind of says, well, hey, people didn't really know what date to use. And then he continues on and he talks about, in this section, the Council of Nicaea, which was not in Rome at all, but actually in Turkey. And they mandated that December 25th be the date that, you know, they were going to say that the Savior was born. And, you know, keep in mind, as Reverend BARASHANGO points out, that was 325 years after the supposed birth of Jesus the Christ. So very interesting history. Now here in Sacramento, these are some elders from back in the day, and some of them have gone on to the ancestors. So here in the back was, you know, one of the founding members of WOʻSE, Henry Emmanuel Hightower. He just passed away this year. Sister Valeria, who we're always talking about, is here. She passed away a couple of years ago. And the first of these to pass away was Brother Bolton. And Brother Bolton was really kind of one of our first fundraisers. And he was very skilled in carpentry, and he made the podiums for Sacramento and Oakland, and the chairs that the ministers sit in both locations, and other wood crafts. And you know, he was at every meeting. Anytime we had a meeting, he was there. If it was a Wednesday night class, if it was service, if it was an elders meeting, he was always there. And then Mother Spraggins here in the center. She was the mother of a member. His name is Carl Spraggins, and he was jack of all trades in terms of a painter, and just really good with his hands. But the person I want to talk about today, and he just passed away this year also, is Reverend Ray Robertson. I should have put Reverend Ray Robertson, but that's him here on the end, on the left here. He was always a sharp dresser. And but he was a very wise man, schooled in the scriptures. And when he would go to other churches, the ministers and everybody would get nervous because he knew so much about the Bible, and he was part of a research group. And so he used to say this about this holiday. He would use this scripture, Luke 1:26 through 38, which talks about in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to the city of Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph. And so what this scripture is saying is that this is when the Virgin Mary was impregnated. And it goes on, don't be afraid. I mean, they make songs about this, right? Mm-hmm. And so he shows us this scripture, and then he asks us, well, okay, the 6th month, do they mean the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar? No, they mean the Hebrew calendar. And so when we look at the Hebrew calendar, the dates don't line up because it's a lunar calendar. They don't line up with the Gregorian calendar that we are using right now. They don't line up with the Julian calendar. And so when we look at this wheel here, if we count to the 6th month, we come over to the month of Elul, and that's in September. And then when we count 9 months, we come over here to the 3rd month, Sivan, which would be somewhere between May and June, when the birth of the Savior took place. So he would point out things like that to us, and he would. I didn't even know about this until he brought this up. So, any questions before I move on?
No, it's very insightful. It's interesting that he would be involved in this kind of research.
Well, Reverend Robertson was a very interesting cat, as they say. I would talk to him, and he would say, hey, I used to be a hobo. I used to be a detective. I had a trucking company when I was in Los Angeles, and I had 35 dump trucks. And so when I knew him, later in his life, he had properties here in the Sacramento area, that he would rent out. And so, I think that's how he made his living. He was married, and it was just, he liked us. We loved him, and and was good. He was also he was an acrobat too. And one day we had a Wednesday night class. I never will forget. It was at the Oak Park Center, and we used to do all kind of classes like we're doing now on Zoom. And we had Bay Sola, who was a maestro of the capoeira martial arts. And, in capoeira, they do a lot of acrobatic fighting, a lot of handstands and, quick kicks, coming from the floor and flipping over. And so he had everybody. We also had like 35 people there that night. And so he had us in a circle, and different people would get in the circle. And then Reverend Robertson got in the circle. So Reverend Robertson at the time, he was in his 70s then. And he fell down on the floor, and people went like, oh no, and then he bounced back up, because he used to be an acrobat. So, I mean, he was a very interesting person.
Sounds like it.
Now, moving on, in the book Ancient Egypt, Light of the World by Gerald Massey, I found this I found this picture, and when I looked at it, you know, it resembles a Christmas tree, you know, because it has the star at the top, you know, and this is probably a acacia. But what this circle represents is the flaming sword that guarded the tree in the Garden of Eden. You know, but when I looked at it, you know, it looked a lot like a Christmas tree. We'll come back to that. So this was my introduction to Santa, and I don't look like I liked him. You know,
look a little suspicious.
Yeah, like
very suspicious.
Mom, Dad, who is this man? You know.
Yeah, your eyes are kind of cutting.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if I'm getting ready to cry or what, but you know, it's like I'm thinking, ugh.
Something's not right.
And this is how many of us are introduced to Santa. You know, it's like, you know, they tell you about this thing, and then you go to the department store. I think this was at Capwell's in Oakland, and
you were perfectly dressed.
Yeah. My mom.
White.
Yeah. My mom. She was a snappy dresser. You know, she was a snappy dresser. So, yeah. I want to move on though. It turns out I took this picture myself when I was in Kemet. This is around the temple of Dendera. This is the netter Bes, and Bes is actually a prototype of Santa, if you could believe it, because he was like a patron of pregnant women, children, and it was said that he brought gifts to children. And, you know, this is a prototype of Santa. And then I found this little passage that says some Christians believe that Santa Claus, that the Santa Claus concept came from the pagan Egyptian god Bes, a rotund gnome-like personage, was the patron of little children. Bes was said to live at the North Pole, working year-round to produce toys for children who had been good and obedient to their parents.
That's the whole story right there.
Yeah, you know, I thought, wow, really?
Yeah,
you know, and then they go on. You know, I mean, things originate somewhere. Like, have you ever heard that old story of there's a mother, and she's making bread, and she always would cut the end off of the bread, and so her daughter asked her that question: why do you cut that off? And the reply was, well, you know, I always saw my mother do that. And so she called her mother, and she said, well, I always saw your grandmother do that. And when they got to the grandmother, who was still around, they said, why did you cut it like that? And she said, oh, because back in those days, we didn't have pans that were long enough. You know, and so people do things, and then just over time, they become a tradition. Now, so there's Santa, and then there's Saint Nick, or Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas was a bishop in Turkey. There's Turkey again. So, and these are representations of how he looked. He was an Ethiopian Coptic bishop stationed in Turkey. Yeah.
Which was Constantinople at the time, wasn't it?
Yes. And so if you look at the Coptic church in Ethiopia, Egypt, and the church in Turkey, you know, they celebrate different days than the Western Christians do, you know, which we kind of address. So they look at the year, at the date as January 6th, when Christ was born, for some reason, which I'm not totally clear on. But I just thought this was interesting.
It is.
This is the original Old Saint Nick.
More.
Yeah, a more. Now, this picture has been floating around for years, and I want you to study it for a minute. You can see the Christian story in this relief, which is found. It is found at Luxor, and it is found at Hatshepsut's temple. And what you see here is you see the Neteru Chehudi, or Thoth, announcing to the Virgin that she is going to, you know, get pregnant by God. And then the next section, you see Khnum, which if you remember, or maybe you know, or maybe you don't know, Khnum is the potter, and so he's making people on the potter's wheel.
Right.
And then there's Het Heru, or Het Hor, or which means house of the sun, or house of Horus, Heru, and so they are. You know, it's interesting. A masculine and feminine principles are giving the Ankh, the source of life, holding it up to her nostrils. And then you go to the next slide. Here she is on the birthing chair, and she has attendants. And then the slide beneath, the child is born, and there's people giving adoration to the child. So I asked, you know, we had Brother Muhammad Fahmy back in October, and for those of you that missed it, you really missed a really great presentation. So, you know, if I find some things I just don't know, or you know, I'll send him a quick note, you know, asking him about it, because I really don't like to, I like to give you all the most correct information that I can. And so he wrote back, he said, hey brother, it looks like the birth scene from Hatshepsut's temple. There's another typical one in Luxor. I can't read the cartouche. Do you have a higher resolution pic? And then after, you know, we were talking a little bit, he says, it's Hatshepsut's birth scene. Now, Hatshepsut is she became a queen king of the 18th dynastic period, and she has one of the most ecologically sound temples that's on the west bank of the Nile. And so he confirmed that, hey, it's at Luxor, but it's also at Hatshepsut. Unfortunately, I could not find a better resolution of this. And, you know, I don't know everything or pretend to know everything. And so if you all may see this or be able to locate this and find a better resolution of this picture, you know, the Annunciation, the impregnation of the Virgin through the Holy Spirit, the sitting on the birthing chair and giving birth, you know, please send me a note, shoot me a note, because I'd like to get a little bit better. When I was at Luxor Temple, it was at night, and so I saw a lot of things, and a lot of things were pointed out, but I didn't have the presence of mind to say, oh, we're here, I need to get this, I need to look at this. So but next time I go, I'm going to definitely look for this. And when I was at Hatshepsut's temple, it was in 1981, and I didn't know about this particular bas relief.
And it was in both places. It was at.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then, okay, the story evolved. I mean, I'm going to get around to Kwanzaa, but here we see this. This is supposed to be Orion with the 3 stars in its belt. And many believe that this lines up with the 3 Great Pyramids, but there's a tradition among the indigenous wisdom keepers that there's not 3 Great Pyramids at Giza, but in fact there are 9. They just haven't been unearthed yet. And keep in mind that there are there's only 20% of the monuments, tombs, temples, etc., that's been unearthed.
Wow.
And right now, if you went to Cairo, if you went to Cairo today, there's estimates, there's not an exact count, but there's estimates between 15 to 25 million people there in Cairo alone. And you know, it's a lot of people there. So anyway, this is Sahu, or Orion, with the 3 stars in his belt, and then it moves on to the Greek version, and then okay, the Nordic version, you know, that looks like Thor, and then you know, then you have Santa. You know, you see the evolution of that story. But really, the story has its origin in the astronomical movements of the Earth and the Sun. So yesterday, today, on up to the December 24th, these are the shortest days of the year. So the Sun goes into this, so it has an ecliptic orbit. You know, it goes up here. It goes up and down. It appears to us on Earth. It really doesn't. You know, it's just we're revolving around the Sun and rotating, and so it has this appearance to people on Earth. So the Sun gets at its southernmost point in the sky, and then it kind of pauses for 3 days. December 21st, 23rd, 24th. And then on December 25th, it is the first day that the Sun noticeably lengthens, the day noticeably lengthens, and then it proceeds up its ecliptical orbit. And you know, the days get longer gradually, all the way going to June 21st, 22nd, and then they gradually start getting, so then it goes south. And the people in Kemet, they depicted it this way. And here's Aset, or Isis, that the Greeks called her Isis, and Nebhet, or Nephthys, the sisters. And then here, this Jed symbol represents Wasir, or Osiris. And then, of course, the Ankh and the Sun. And then, you know, okay, 1,000 years later, it becomes this, Mary and Mary Magdalene at the cross with Jesus. And then here, you know, here it kind of gives you the Sun, because it has this corona around the head. So that's really, you know, people talk about the reason for the season. This is really the reason for the season. And here's another depiction. We have Orion, which the ancients called Sahu. And then you have the modern Jesus on his sleigh. So this next bit of information comes from Brother ASHRA KWESI. He has a wonderful DVD on the African origin of Christianity. And he points out how, he says, the goal of this harm manipulation of kames or charismas is intended to spiritually enslavement of Africans and keeping over 1.2 billion Christians all over the world in poor spiritual shell. And he shows how it's depicted in temples. And actually, I have this on the right here, where it says Virgo the Virgin. I actually have this. I have this map. It's like a map of the universe that I got. Remember has anybody ever gone to the old Nature Company? Remember the Nature Company back in the day, in the 80s, and you can get all these cool stuff. Well, I got this map, and it has all the known stars, quasars, black holes, novas, supernovas, etc. is all on this. And actually when you turn the lights out in the room, the map glows like a nighttime sky. So he shows how the line comes through the Virgin, which is happening in September, which is what is said in what I showed you earlier about the Hebrew calendar. And then he points out various things. So I would recommend, if you want to find more information about this, purchase ASHRA KWESI's video, African Origin of Christianity. He goes in length and does a very good job on this subject. You know, so here, astrology, the source of the Jesus story. Orion's belt is the three wise men. The star in the east is Sirius, and the sunrise is the birth of the sun. So that's really what they were talking about. They, you know, and they dressed it up in different stories so that people wouldn't forget. But you know, what the problem is that people begin to believe that. You know, and then next thing you know, it turns into Santa Claus. Here's another depiction. Here are the wise men. Here are the three stars in Orion's belt. And they point to the star Sirius, the star in the east, and the birth of the sun happens just after the winter solstice. So I know I'm just such a killjoy. I just ruin things. I ruin things for everybody. And so, you know, when I used to be at home with my parents, and I started getting a little bit more information. And so when you look at a Christmas tree, you know, you have like a star at the top, and then you have like these balls, and these are the stars, moons, and planets. You know, we're actually you know, depicting it, but we don't know what it means.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Here again, and you know, these glyphs are kind of odd, so I'm not really sure what they're saying, but according to Gerald Massey, these are talking about the flaming sword that's guarding the tree in Eden. And you know, I was walking down the street one day here in Elk Grove, and it was in the morning, and I happened to see this picture, and I took it. You know, there's a redwood tree, and there was the sun coming over.
All right, it's a good shot.
So, you know, getting back to Reverend Isamusa BARASHANGO, he says, finally, Christmas historically has no real religious significance except to the European world. As such, it has no meaning for us. A people for it does not culturally project us in a positive light. Therefore, its failure to meet this need means we can only be working against our best interests, understanding that there are still some immature members of our race who feel they couldn't live without Christmas. We appeal to them to stop the wild spending and acting so foolishly during the Christmas season and divest themselves of this mania. The supposed happiness obtained from the merry mess is too brief to pay such a physical, mental, spiritual, and economic price for. And now we invite you to examine the next 2 chapters of this book, which demonstrate and explore the historical roots and meaning of the 7 Black holy days of Kwanzaa. And then he goes in. So that's how he concludes that section, and he goes into Kwanzaa. Now, this is Brother Keon, and those of you that are in Sacramento may know Brother Keon. And he took this picture, I think last year, and posted it on Facebook. So of course I saved it. And he was in San Francisco, somewhere, Embarcadero, someplace. And they had this large Kwanzaa display. You see that, you know, it's a life-size Kwanzaa display.
It's huge.
Yeah, yeah. So now we're going to get into Kwanzaa finally. I'm glad you finally made it, Minister Imhotep. My goodness, all that Christmas stuff. Okay, so now Kwanzaa, pre-Kwanzaa celebration, which is what we're kind of doing now. So the Kwanzaa starts with the US organization, and it was a part of KWANZAA, and they wanted to have a ceremony that took us away from the crass commercialism of Christmas. You know, actually, that was more culturally centered, non-heroic, something that African people could be a part of. Now, Kwanzaa did not start in Africa. I have to say that. Kwanzaa is a cultural synthesis of different first fruits celebrations across the continent, north, south, east, and west. If we look at ancient Kemet, they had a festival of Min, M-I-N. It's a form of Amen. And he's noted because you see him there and he's standing there and he's got an erect penis. He actually represents fertility. If you go to Ghana, they have a yam festival. If you go to South Africa, they have, you know, all people that are dealing with agriculture and close to the land, you know, they base everything upon agriculture, and they watch the stars and knowing how to plant and knowing, you know, every aspect when the plants are going to grow and produce harvest. And when they do produce harvest, then they have a big festival. And that's what Kwanzaa is. It's really Matunda ya Kwanzaa, first fruits of the harvest, Kwanzaa. Now, I remember this happening in, I think it was in 1990. We were giving Kwanzaa up here in Sacramento, and this sister came up. She was from Tanzania, and she was going to catch me. And we had this big banner, and it said Kwanzaa. And she went over to me and she says, "That's not how we spell Kwanzaa. We don't spell it with 2 A's. We spell it with 1 A." Well, I had to explain to her that the reason why there are 2 A's is because in those early days of the US organization, there were 7 children participating in the first Kwanzaa, and they each had something to say. And so they didn't want to leave anyone out. And so Dr. Karinga added an extra A for Kwanzaa. She was like, oh, you know, like she wanted to really get me, wanted to really trip me up on it.
You were ready for.
Yeah, fortunately. You know, now there are different Kwanzaa books. This is like one of the first ones. And I think the date says September 1965. So that's when Kwanzaa, you know, so it goes back to the year 1965. So that's how long it's been in existence. But it's a cultural synthesis of different first fruits festivals around the continent. And so he uses Kiswahili because it's a universal language. It's a language that's spoken by 30 million people. People speak it in Kenya, people speak it in Uganda, they speak it in Tanzania, they speak it in Malawi. And it's a Bantu-based language, and it's used to speak among various ethnic groups. So Kikuyu can talk to Lao, can talk to Maasai, and talk to different people, and so it's a universal language that, like English, it has a lot of other words in it that are not originally from the Bantu-based language, but it incorporates all these different languages that people are using in that region. So that he chose that because it's a non-tribal language. So Moja unity, Kujichagulia, self-determination, Imani, collective work and responsibility, UJAMAA, cooperative economics, Nia purpose, Kuumba creativity, and Imani faith. And so, I tried to take a good picture in here. And so he's talking about Kwanzaa develops and channels, us into a positive, creative, proactive direction so that Kwanzaa is saved from the crass commercialism, spookism, Christomization, and trivialization, which would eventually deform and destroy it. Can anybody tell me why Dr. Karinga chose December 26th as the day to begin Kwanzaa?
We chose that day to not to compete with the Christmas holiday, and to have a continuous span of time to celebrate those principles.
That's a good reason. Anyone else want to jump in? Anybody else?
I would say maybe since it's the end of the year, we could reflect on everything that has happened throughout the year, and everything that you've benefited from, and you do the reflection, and then you start off anew with, like we usually have all kinds of New Year's resolutions. But I guess that throughout the days of Kwanzaa, you reflect on what has happened in that year, and the last day would be New Year's Day, and you're starting anew. That's what I would think.
Yeah, that's very good. Anyone else? That is 2 of the 8 people that are on tonight. Anyone else want to jump in?
Was it because the sun was moving, or the sun started moving and moving toward the constellation of Virgo or something? Have anything to do with that? I'm just guessing.
Yeah, those are all very good guesses. Let me just say, the reason why he chose it is because he noticed, and this was in the 60s, and it's still like this to this day, only not so much with Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and so the day after Christmas is when all the sales, everything goes down. It's cut in half. Sometimes it's cut 3/4. So he was trying to get people away from, just focusing on, because we go into debt, you know, during the Christmas season, and, you know, it's a lot of anxiety. And so he noticed that, you know, the sales happen really after the day after Christmas. And so that was one of the main reasons why he used December 26th.
That is to say, to keep us out of the stores on that day?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, if you're going to give gifts, you know, at least wait until after all this, you know, as he puts it, crass commercialism, and at least you know, you don't have to spend as much because there are gifts involved in Kwanzaa.
But I think I understood it to be more of not the commercial gifts, but like handmade gifts, to be creative and what you give versus going to purchase something out of the department stores.
It is that. And so the Zawadis are given based upon promises made and promises kept. So go ahead.
Wikipedia says that during the early years of Kwanzaa, Karenga said it was meant to be an alternative to Christmas. He believed Jesus was psychotic and Christianity was a white religion that Black people should shun. As Kwanzaa gained mainstream adherence, Karenga altered his position so practicing Christians would not be alienated, stating in the 1997 book, Kwanzaa, A Celebration of Family, Community, and Culture, that Kwanzaa was not created to give people an alternative to their own religion or religious holiday.
Well, yeah, but you know what? He addresses that. So he addresses that in this first book. You know, he says that. That's why I really encourage people to read his first book. You know, those are good things that they put in Wikipedia, but you know, he says that in his first book. And so then he goes on to say he didn't want Kwanzaa to be, you know, he didn't want people to add a whole bunch of stuff in with Kwanzaa. He said, you know, so he says, it's not a time for fasting or praying or reading numbers readings or reading star charts or chanting spooky slogans or anything like that. You know, he said, you can do that on other days, but don't do it on Kwanzaa. You know, he said it's not about widespread, alienated, expensive gift giving while imposing unnecessary, excessive financial burdens on people. On the contrary, one of its functions is to, you know, in the pages cut off, the economic entrapment and alienated gift giving, which Christmas season has come to include and demand. It is in an effort to escape this entrapment and alienation activity that I established the days of Kwanzaa for December 26th through January 1st. And he said gifts are mainly given to children and that they always on the basis of merit in terms of commitment made and commitment kept. He said they are not mandatory, excessive, or, you know, so, you know, he, in a sense, you just think about it in the 60s, it's really going against the grain. I mean, everybody, look what my parents did. And, you know, God bless them. They were just trying to give me a good, you know, experience as a child, but, you know, they were wrapped up in it. And I always had a real hard time trying to reconcile the birth of Jesus and Santa Claus. I really was trying to understand it, you know? So he goes on, yeah, it's not a Black Christmas. It's not a Black Hanukkah. It's a non-heroic, non-religious cultural celebration of African people. So that's, you know, that's in a nutshell. But again, I would really encourage, there's different versions of his Kwanzaa book, but this is the first one. And you can still get it, I believe. You know, if you look for it, you're still able to get it. You know, of course, you know, when something first comes out, over the years it receives refinement, etc. So there's different versions of it. So I just wanted to add those things. Thank you, Celeste and Dandiwe and Katabazi for including those things. You know, so he looks at, so like next Wednesday, we're going to be looking at the principle of Nia. And, you know, he really gets into what each principle means. You know, purpose, we shall make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community and the restoration of our people to our traditional greatness. And then he goes into and he explains it a little bit more. At the core of this principle is the assumption and contention that the highest form of personal purpose is, in the final analysis, social purpose, i.e. personal purpose that translates itself into a vocation and commitment which involves and benefits the masses of Black people. Such level and quality of purpose not only benefits the whole, the collective whole, but also gives fullness and meaning to a person's life in a way that individualistic and isolation pursuits can't. And, you know, so each principle is, you know, really extrapolated and elucidated by Dr. Karenga in his books on Kwanzaa. And, you know, there are many people that don't like Dr. Karenga, and I'm not going to get into that. But one thing you can't say is he's not a good scholar. You know, he has done his homework, and people are celebrating Kwanzaa all over the world. There is a movie out. How many have heard of this movie? It's called The Black Candle. Have you heard of that movie?
Nope.
Yeah, look for that movie. I think you can get it on YouTube. You know, it was, you know, it's a movie that you purchase also, but it's a movie that was done by Molefi Asante Jr. So Dr. Molefi Asante was the chairman of ethnic studies, Black studies at Temple University. I think he's professor emeritus there. And his son made a movie called The Black Candle. It's narrated by Maya Angelou, and it's showing people practicing Kwanzaa all over the world. He actually goes to France, where Black people are celebrating Kwanzaa, and they're speaking French and Kiswahili on Kwanzaa. It's really quite extraordinary what he uses. Now there are 7 principles for a better life. So there's Umoja. And now just, I guess in the last few years, these Ndinkra symbols have been come to associate with these 7 principles of the NGUZO SABA. So you have unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose. Now this is a Kemetic symbol. Usually it means beautiful or nefer, but it also means harmony. Kuumba, creativity, and Imani, faith. And I like what Dandiwe had said, that, you know, so Kwanzaa begins on the 26th. That's the first day. The last day actually begins on, actually, the last day is on, I'm reading people's
Chats.
Yeah. Okay, let me just pause. So there was a question. Where did I say to find the link? So to find the link, you go into WOʻSE.
So Dandiwe showed a screenshot, and I was trying to figure out, was that YouTube or?
Oh, I didn't see her screenshot.
It was the black candle. I was just trying.
It says, what is that? MKASANTE.com.
Yeah.
MKAsante.com.
Okay, thank you.
So it was the screen. I don't know if you could see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So, you know, here are the 7 principles of the NGUZO SABA.
Wait, go back. Where is it?
I'll
Where
write
do
it in the chat. I'll write it in the chat.
Oh,
No,
thank you.
not the black candle. Where's the program going to be next week?
So it's going to be, if you go to WOSESAC.com,
Jose Sack. Okay.
and I put that in the chat, WOSESAC.com, and there will be a link to go. There's no password. You can just go there, click the link and join us. We're starting at 5. And here Debbie has put mkasante.com to get the movie The Black Candle. Thank you, Debbie, for
And
that.
Minister, before you go on, you
Mhm.
had a thought. You were saying something about what I mentioned about.
Oh, yes. So
last
what
day.
you said was, I liked what you said, and this is something I always reflect on. You begin the year on Imani, faith. You know, it starts on December 26th and it goes through January 1st. The last principle of KWANZAA starts the new year off with Imani, faith. We shall believe with all our hearts, and our teachers, our leaders, and our people, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. Yeah. So you have Umoja, Kujichagulia. These are all Kiswahili words: unity, self-determination. UJIMA, collective work and responsibility. I first heard that, those of you that have been around me a while, you know, the first time I heard this was during Sanford and Son. It was an episode of Sanford and Son. Lamont came home and said, "Pop, we need some UJIMA in this house." And he changed his name to Kalunda. And the whole episode was about KWANZAA and Africa and daishikis. And he was trying to court a young lady, Paula Kelly, because she was fine. And, you know, but the way that he talked to his dad, she shamed him at the end of the episode. She says, "Brother Kalunda, you know, you cannot mistake Africa for a hairstyle and a name. You know," she said, the clothes you can take on and off, but the heart you must change. That was the first time I heard about UJIMA. And you got to remember, that was in 72.
Yeah.
And so KWANZAA had only been 6 years old when that came out. All right, Nia, purpose. Kuumba, creativity. And lastly, Imani, faith. And we've been celebrating KWANZAA throughout the years. Now, all of these children now are grown, but we were getting ready for a program, and Channel 13 up here, which is the Bay Area equivalent to Channel 7, came to our building and interviewed me, and the children were rehearsing. So that's them. And, you know, we had the KWANZAA table, etc. And that's our old location at 35th Street in Oak Park. And these are some personal folders, personal pictures of KWANZAA, you know, when we had KWANZAA at our home. And so you have the Kinara, and that represents the first ancestors of the African people. And you have the Misumi Saba, the 7 candles with the principles. And you have the Kikombe Cha Umoja, the unity cup for pouring libations and sharing the unity cup at the conclusion of KWANZAA. You have the Vibunzi, which is representing the children. And however many children are in the home, that's how many ears of corn you have. And the kernels represent the future generations. And then you have the meso, the crops, which is the point of Kwanzaa. It's first fruits of the harvest festival. And then you have the zawadi, the gifts to be given for promises made and promises kept. And the bandera, the red, black, and green flag that was introduced to us by the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. And so this is how the Alkebalans do their table, you know, when we have Kwanzaa.
Nicely done.
So this is Dr. Karinga visited Sacramento one time, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago now, and I got a chance to drive him around, him and his wife, Tia Moyo, and I snapped this picture. This is at McGeorge Law School here in Sacramento. And these are the early days of Kwanzaa for us. Newspapers would come by and take pictures, and that's how we would advertise. And these are some friends of ours, Clifford and Ricky. I can't remember what. I think Clifford is the son and Ricky is the father, and that's me and Mrs. Alkebalan. And then we really went all out at our Kwanzaa celebration in 1995, and we had this photographer, and they made these pictures, and so here then we had children, and there's Ra, and Kaba had just been born because he was born in September, so he's a babe in arms, and Doris made these outfits for us.
You guys look royal there.
And then Kaba had a black preschool teacher, and you know, so they had a holiday celebration at the conclusion, you know, just be going into the Christmas break, and she made Miss Veronica was her name, and she made Kaba this crown, red, black, and green crown. And so for those of you that are in the Bay Area, the Sacramento equivalent to the Oakland Post is the Sacramento Observer. And so this is one of the years that we made the paper. And so, you know, you'd have to really get close up on some of these pictures. But yeah, this was one of our Kwanzaa celebrations back in, I think it says 93. And that's another Alkebalan tradition. And so you see here, this is another one of the Kwanzaa books. I don't know if you can see that where I'm pointing there. And then there's another. So he has like about 3 or 4 different versions that have come out on the celebration of Kwanzaa. And what I'm holding in my hand here is the DVD for the Black Candle. And so what we used to do is, you know, as people were milling around at the beginning of Kwanzaa, we would just have the movie, The Black Candle, which is a documentary. And as I said, it's narrated by Maya Angelou. And we would just have it on silent because it's really a beautiful depiction of the Kwanzaa celebration around the world. You know, city to city, different countries. And this is on Dr. Karinga's website. You know, and again, the Kanara, representing the first ancestors of the African people, the Masumi Saba, the 7 principles. You like the black one for unity, and then you like the red one for Kujichagulia, and then you like the green one for UJIMA. And the reason why that is because the red represents the blood and the struggle, and the green represents the growth. And before there is growth, there has to be a struggle. There has to be some type of breaking the ground, or as it were. Here the Vibunzi, representing the children, the meso, the crop, the mkeka, I forgot that the last last depiction, the Mkeka, which is the foundation, the straw mat. Minister Makalisi kind of addressed that last week, and the Bendera, the flag, and the Kikombe cha Umoja, the unity cup. And this is one of our, and this is the basic program that we use when we celebrate Kwanzaa. So we'll have some interlude music, and then we'll have a drum call, and then back, I think I want to say 1995, 97, a sister that was organizing our Kwanzaa by the name of Karen Green, who also has the name Zion, got all these flags from Africa, and the children would march in with the flags from Africa. So we would have entrance of the Bandera, of course, lift every voice and sing. And then we would, we would have the children proceed in with the Kwanzaa symbols, explanation of the Kwanzaa symbols. We would recognize the elders, seat the elders. And at first, nobody wanted to be an elder. We'd say, okay, who's the oldest female? And nobody would raise their hand. And who's the oldest male? And people maybe sheepishly, anybody over here is 70. Anybody, but as the years went on, people were almost running down the aisle to be recognized as an elder. So that's a pleasant, expression of the growth of the ceremony. We have cultural expressions. We'd have a welcoming, and I put this in. This is not part of the Kwanzaa actual official Kwanzaa, but I put this voices from the motherland, and we'll have different people from the continent greet us in their native language, and then give a translation for us. We have music, we pour libation, we have reflections, we have a community song, there's a message of the day. We'll have a cultural expressions, then we'll light the candles, a musical expression, then we'll share the unity cup, usually an elder and a youth, and then we'll have some closing remarks, and then a karamu, a festival. So that's how we do it here in Sacto. And this is from a previous year. We always do it just about that way. Yeah. All right, and this is from previous years at this place that was done by, that was actually a brother who was on the city council here in Sacramento by the name of Sam Pinnell, was the driving force for the building of this center that's now called the Sam and Bonnie Pinnell Center. And this is where we would have Kwanzaa back in the 90s, early 2000s. And last year we had some elders over at the house. These are some of our elders. There's Sister Ann and Sister Donna and Sister Temperance and Sister Sofensa and Sister Asata. And they're getting ready for the Karamu there. And then we bought this banner a number of years ago. Well, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. And we didn't put any specific principles, so we can just use it every year. And that's what they're taking their picture there. And there's Wasuf and Mikaeli and Ndada Teresa and my nephew here, Timothy. And this is Bill. Many of you know Bill Johnson. This is his wife, Rita. So they joined us one night for Kwanzaa. And here are Bill and Rita at another table that we used. And we've had various flyers. This was the flyer last year that we used, and we had it at the Wackford Center here in Elk Grove, and we went from 5:30 to 9:30, and this is the flyer for this year. So please note that The website is there at the bottom, WOʻSE SAC. Go to WOSESAC.com for the link to the celebration session, okay? And it starts at 5. Would love to see you all there. And we've never done a Kwanzaa on Zoom. That should be interesting.
Yeah,